Just hopefully that we did good work and that we cultivated a good audience. Like, I go out of my way to let bad people know that I don't want their money. I don't want their business. I don't want them here. They can go to some other website. They can give them the clicks or whatever.
What's going on, guys? It's your boy, Tom Talk Trash, and welcome to the 150th episode of Tom Talk Trash. And I am joined by a name you know. I am joined by the man, the myth, the absolute legend. That is Sean Ross Sapp from Fight for Wrestling. So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I mean, I know that we've been trying to make this work for a while, and finally it did. And as we were saying off the air, I think the timing worked out pretty well.
Definitely. So, if we take this back to the beginning, Sean, where do you first discover wrestling? But as a fan,
where do I first discover it? Man, I was a child, and I don't remember how it popped up on my TV screen, but it was a Clash of the Champions. I'm sure it was taped long before that, and it was being replayed or something like that. But there was a cage in the middle of the ring, or in the middle of the arena, and on the top of one turnbuckle stood Ric Flair with this big blonde hair. On the other turnbuckle sat the Great Muta, who just retired recently, and in this vivid face paint. And then scaling the cage was Sting, who was this muscular, vivid colored, face painted, spiky haired guy. It was like so much of that drew me to wrestling. And I was like, well, there's no way I can ever give this up. Whatever this is, I want to know more about. That was my first vision.
So you brought up there, were you not familiar with wrestling at all at that point? In the sense of, like, did you not know what it was?
No, I had no idea what it was at that point. No clue. Outside of, me and my cousin, who was like my brother, wrestling around and goofing around and stuff like that. But I knew pretty quickly that it was something that I wanted. I liked competition and combat and athletics and stuff like that. And that was a perfect mixture of all of those.
So then when it comes to discovering WCW, once you've discovered this, you're like, get this in my veins sort of thing. How do you then go about consuming the content?
Well, funny enough, like, that was my first memory of wrestling. I don't really remember watching much WCW after that. Like, occasionally, like, I want to say 2-3 years later, my cousin and I would be at my grandmother's house and we would watch WCW Saturday night. But I was mainly a WWF kid. I loved how bright things were. I loved the presentation. You had Hulk Hogan, the bright colors, Legion of Doom, the multicolor, the face paint. The Rockers were a favorite of mine. They were very colorful. To me, it was honestly the presentation, color, and all that really drew me to it, the pomp and circumstance. And then when I see Shawn Michaels and Marty Jannetty, I'm like, oh my gosh, they're doing incredibly athletic things as well. But that I ended up being more of a WWF kid.
Do you have a specific reason why that was the case, or was it just the content you had access to?
Probably the content I had access to as well. It was on. I remember I would go to church with my aunt and my other cousins, and then All American Wrestling would be on, or Superstars would be on right after church got done, or whatever that may be. It was the ease of access there. Pretty soon after that, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And instead of, just believing I might have ADHD, there were a lot of fingers pointed at whatever content I was consuming. Like, wrestling was blamed. Yeah. Wrestling was blamed for my hyperactivity. I wasn't allowed to watch it at home for a long time. So when I would be another family member on the weekend, I would get that opportunity to catch up. And on Saturday evenings, that's WCW, but Sunday mornings, which is when I was able to watch it a little bit more, was usually WWF.
Well, you talked about there wrestling being sort of the forbidden fruit of your childhood. How Did that change
Yeah.
your fandom in the sense was did that make you more excited to watch?
It sort of did. Like maybe like that's a good point, but I just wanted to watch it. Like I knew it was something that I loved more than anything. I was also big into baseball at that point, but there was something about pro wrestling that was just a little bit different that made me be like, okay, I've got to ingest this. I think because it was constantly evolving and it never ended. With baseball in the winter months, the cold months around Christmas time especially, like if I got something baseball related, well that's nice, but in a few months it's not spring training for a few months. But Christmas as a wrestling fan, it's still going. Like wrestling never ends, and I think that was a big part of it for me.
Mm. You talked about wrestling evolving there, and to segue, how does your fandom evolve as we get into sort of the Attitude Era, maybe even the Ruthless Aggression Era?
So again, I wasn't allowed to watch it for a long time, and then ironically enough, through the Attitude Era is when I was able to watch it. When it could have been far more easily blamed for behavioral issues or hyperactivity or any number of things, I was actually able to rewatch it. I remember my mom kind of she eased that burden a little bit. She got me a wrestling video game for my birthday one year, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, the curse is over! I can finally watch again." ECW on TNN was a big part of me being like, okay, I want to have something to do with wrestling, whether I was a wrestler or on screen or writing or whatever it was. When I got the ability to watch ECW on TNN, that was good for me. And I think that was especially good because it was a more sanitized version of ECW. There weren't the barbed wire and all those things that I've never really been into, but there were a lot of like table spots and there were really athletic / hardcore performers that I really liked a lot more because when you're a kid and you're wrestling with your friends or your family or whatever, you use the weapons and all that stuff and you have your fun. And ECW just felt a lot more fun to me. And it was easily digestible. It appealed to, again, my ADHD diagnosis by constantly changing and evolving and new wrestlers. That definitely helped a lot. I was not that into WCW by then. Once the Goldberg, the streak ended and they lost a lot of direction, I was like, okay. And that broke my heart because I love the cruiserweight division. WWF did not like the match quality as much, but the entertainment and the stories that went on were more entertaining. So I was in ECW for excitement and quality. I was into WCW because you would get glimpses of that in-ring spectacular stuff, and WWF for the stories at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Ruthless Aggression, I love the Ruthless Aggression era. I thought that was a wonderful mix of story and athleticism and in-ring. And not only that, they were bringing in Brock Lesnar, Shelton Benjamin, Charlie Haas, and I loved amateur wrestling. So being able to see them in there with Kurt Angle, that was big for me.
So when it comes to, there's a lot to unpack there. When it comes to digesting the three big promotions at the time, you mentioned reasons that you liked all of them, but do you feel like any of them would work the way they were presented back then today?
I think ECW could to some degree. They could make some changes, of course. WCW, I definitely don't think they could. WWF would have to make a lot of changes based on the women's content. But I think that if you didn't compromise the high level women's wrestling that you're seeing now in order to do some of the racier stuff, I feel like some of it could still work as long as everybody was comfortable with it. Like you couldn't put people in uncomfortable positions. But the difference is that was coming at the sacrifice of quality in-ring performances. So I think that would have to be altered too. I think that times have changed a little too much for that to be necessarily like the same if you copied and pasted it.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about the moment you wanted, you know, that you wanted to do something within the wrestling in general, correct?
Yeah.
Uh, so what was the moment that, as I understand it, you started training to do wrestling in 2009, or have I gone back too far there?
A little bit around there. I would dabble a little bit, but I trained in kickboxing and some grappling a little bit before that, and I went to a catch wrestling MMA school in 2009, which
Mm.
it hadn't yet become a catch wrestling school. But I had started to take some like pro wrestling basics from an outfit that was kind of close to me. Then when I got catch wrestling trained, I was like, okay, I need to go through a more solid like sort of training situation. Unfortunately, there were a few people near me that like we were able to exchange basically some class time and some training and some other work in order for me to be trained as a pro wrestler. But honestly, I would love to go back and like start from scratch and go through like pro wrestling training again. But yeah, I did get trained in pro wrestling. I want to say probably closer to 2010, 20. My MMA training started around 2000.
Ah, okay. So then when it comes to working in the wrestling media, you started, what year did you start working in the media itself?
It was January 4th, 2010. It was the night
Ah,
that Bret Hart came back on Raw, and I think TNA was going up head to head with WWE, and I hit up a few different places. The main one I wanted to write for was Bill Apter because I grew up reading his magazines, and Bill Apter was all too happy to accept some free work. And he said, "Yeah, I like the idea. I had an idea for a column because I was actually falling out of love with pro wrestling at that point. I thought that a lot of the booking was bad. I didn't like the direction TNA was going either because it wasn't what I had loved from like 2005 to 2009, and I was getting more and more into MMA. So at that point, I thought, maybe I'll fight, maybe I'll train and do that full time, maybe I'll cover MMA full time. But I pitched him a column where I was basically giving it till WrestleMania to see how I felt about it. I didn't really believe that I was gonna like kind of go away from watching pro wrestling, but that was the angle I had there, and I did it, and it ended up being successful, at least within the realm of that website. And that's how I got my start working for nothing.
mm. So do you, as someone that did get their start working for nothing, as you say, do you believe that if someone wants to do what you do currently, accepting work for nothing is a way to do it, or do you reckon they might get taken advantage of if they do that too much?
Well, there's possibilities in both. I have never ever asked somebody to work for free, and I never would. If they want to offer to do that, well, that's on them, and they can make that offer on their own. Might accept it, might not, but we have had people that have offered to do work for free, and then I end up paying them for it because the level of quality, the quality of work is there. It depends on path and your opportunity. Everybody has a different opportunity or lack of one of the others. So I think that it's hard to say that people shouldn't do anything. It's all a matter of what you're comfortable with, what you're willing to do, the type of work you're willing to do, and what results you're willing to accept too. You're willing to accept the fact might be working for me, never get paid. Well, because I mean that's a real possibility. It certainly seemed like it was going to be the end game for me for a long time.
Mm. I know you put a deadline at one point, basically saying, if I'm not making money by this, by this point, I need to think of other options. So, do you ever think about where you would be if that was the case?
Oh yeah, all the time. I think about it all the time, and now if something catastrophic happened and I wasn't doing this, I have very fortunately enough connections to where I could probably do some job and live pretty comfortably doing something that I'm at least somewhat passionate about. But back then, like I didn't really have a lot of skills. Like, I mean, I had spent my life training MMA and pro wrestling and learning about those two. I could write a little bit, but like around where I live, the middle of nowhere in Kentucky, there's not a lot of work to be done there. Like maybe I could write for a local paper. There's not much of a living to be done there. So the reality is I would have probably been working at a factory, and I wouldn't have enjoyed it. I've got plenty of friends that do enjoy it and love where they work and have made a wonderful, lucrative career out of it. But considering the way that I'm built mentally, it wouldn't have worked out for me. So I would have had to have found something that did. And I have no clue what that would have been. And for a long time, I was sort of afraid of my own successes and failures. Like, well, what will happen if I fail? What will happen if I succeed? And then I think it was like 2014. I was like, all right, I got to make some money doing this. I can't do this for free or for $20 here and there or ghostwriting for places forever. I can't. I did a lot of free jobs for a very, very long time. And at that point of my life, I was like, I've got to make money doing this because it's not going to be responsible any longer if I don't.
So when you have that moment where you're like, I've got to stop making money, how does the way you're putting out content change? Are you like hammering as many people as you can? Like, this is what I've done. How do you go about getting that paid work per se?
So at the time, I was still writing for Bill Apter. And again, not getting paid to do that. I ran an outlet called Cage Passion Sports, which actually started off as like a promotional website for a local MMA company that I worked for. And I did a ton of things for them. I would coordinate fights, tape fists. I would do interviews. I would do commentary. I would do social media. I would do a lot of that. But they allowed me to use that basically as my single platform to other people, and they made me ownership of it. And I'll never basically offering you like percentage of nothing, but we want you to have it. And it was incredibly valuable to me. Billy Donovan ran that site. That was incredibly important to me because then I went to Fansided and Rant Sports and What Culture at the time, and I was like, here's what I can do. Here's the level I can do it. Here's the amount of time I'm willing to dedicate to it, because I was already dedicating full-time hours to doing this for nothing. So there was already a track record established that I will put in the work and I will put in the hours. So that wasn't necessarily a concern for those three outlets. So I was able to get work at all of them.
Mm-hmm. And then when it comes to getting work for them, I know that leads you to Wrestling Inc., correct?
Sure.
Which then eventually leads you to where you are now, which is Fightful, correct? Mm-hmm. So how do you connect with the great man that is Jimmy Van?
So funny enough, it sort of trailed. Like Fansided was it was what it was. You weren't getting paid much to work there. I left there for What Culture because I wanted to take some more work there. The What Culture thing was a complete just mess, absolute horrible situation to work in. Would never recommend that on anybody, although they got some wonderful people that work there. I want to establish that. The management at the time was abysmal. Made me think that I didn't belong. Outright said, you should stop writing wrestling news. You're not good at it. You won't make a living doing it. And then 2 weeks later, I'm working for Raj Giri at the biggest wrestling website in the world, period. So I went from having no confidence to having, a pretty good amount. And while I wasn't getting exactly paid very much, not exactly, I wasn't getting paid much at all at Wrestling Inc. I was given an awful lot of opportunities. I could cover mostly whatever I wanted. I was trusted with a variety of things. I would help run a lot of the aspects of the website that a lot of people don't know that you got to do. And it was the most important job training for what I'm doing now that I ever had, because I learned about podcasting. I learned about writing. I learned about helping maintain a website. And ironically enough, Jimmy Van, he used to make his living writing wrestling news and then made fortunes doing things elsewhere. He was looking to start up a wrestling and MMA website, and he used some Google term or something, and my profile came up, and there was me doing commentary or something like that, and he actually reached out to Bill Apter, and Bill Apter said, "Oh, Sean Ross Sapp is the person for this job," which goes to show you that sometimes that free work can pay off, because even though I did free work for years for Bill Apter, I'm so glad that I did it, because it led me to living a very comfortable life now. But Jimmy Van and I had one conversation, and honestly, by that time, I had decided to leave Wrestling Inc. I will always love what Raj Giri did for me, but it financially, I had to make a move, because I wasn't going to get at a place to where I could support my family the way I wanted to. And I had one conversation with Jimmy Van, and I said, well, I need a guaranteed contract, because What Culture kind of screwed me over, and that affected my life pretty significantly. And he said, yep, let's do it. And we got the ball rolling. I think we had that conversation in like maybe March or April. And then at the end of June in 2016, we ended up launching Fightful.
I asked you a question earlier about where you would be if you didn't start making money in wrestling media. So where do you think you'd be if you never met Jimmy Van?
I would probably have been working at a factory for a long time, but I think I probably would have ended up covering something else. I mean, if I hadn't met Jimmy Van, I'd still absolutely be covering pro wrestling for sure. I know I'd be covering pro wrestling. I feel like I would have bounced around at a few places, though. I don't think that I would be the newsbreaker to the level in which I am now, because having the full-time job and the ability and the resources to dive into this as much as possible was integral. It was absolutely integral.
So then when it comes to starting work with Fightful and stuff, how much, I suppose, leeway, would that be the right word? How much creative freedom did Jimmy Van give you and stuff like that?
I have almost always had complete creative freedom to do whatever the hell I want. And that's been also very, very important, like just massively important, because he trusted the process in which I believed in, and he trusted that I knew what I was doing. Now, there are some times where we've had some disagreements about things, but by and large, it's been him just being cool with me doing whatever it is that I want to do.
So you talked about the disagreements and stuff, and maybe not always, I don't know how to phrase that, but not always being on the same page as stuff. Can you tell us any times that you've not been on the same page?
I didn't want to work with Vince Russo. We had worked together at Wrestling Inc., and I was actually very relieved when Vince gave his notice to Wrestling Inc. Little did I know that he was giving notice because he was going to work at the same place I was about to work at. And I was not happy with that. In fact, the first conversation I ever had with Raj Giri about Vince Russo was me expressing my concerns and saying, I don't want to compromise my integrity for somebody who doesn't have any. I just didn't want to work with him anymore. I didn't trust him. But you know what? I did my job. That didn't last long at Fightful, fortunately. The second one was the paywall. I didn't want to do the paywall. I wanted Fightful to be free, but objectively, he was right about that. There's also, sometimes my social media conduct, he isn't keen on that, but he also knows that I'm going to do what I want to do. But another one was the magazine. I didn't think that we should do a physical magazine. I thought it was at that point a waste of resources. I didn't think that a physical magazine in America with all the other things that we did could necessarily work. And that's one I ended up being right on, even though he believes it'll work at some point. There are things like that. Like I was right about the magazine. He was right about the paywall. And there have been other things like, but it's mainly like it nothing that lasts longer than like an hour do we really disagree on it or have arguments about. Like we don't really do that. But he knows I'm going to stand my ground, and I know he's going to stand his ground.
So when it comes to your chemistry, because you told me off camera that you're the one that decides who goes on shows with whom, correct? Yeah. So how would you feel your chemistry is different? Because the recaps you are currently on at time of recording is The List and Your Boy with Jimmy Van, which isn't a recap, I know, but it's a podcast, stupid brain. The Raw review with Denise Salcedo, and the AEW Dynamite review with Alex Pulowski. Have I missed anything there?
I think those are right, and I do pay-per-view reviews. I do WWE pay-per-view reviews with Denise, and then I do AEW ones with Julie Cutler.
Okay. So when it comes to deciding who your co-hosts are going to be for recaps, or who you're going to put together for recaps, how do you go about that? Like deciding, I think these two will work well together. I think these two will work well together.
Well, from the jump, I wanted to do a post show with a woman because I thought they were underserved and underrepresented in wrestling media, especially from an opinion standpoint. So we would have Trina, Anna, Denise, Kate, just Julie, any number of women on there. And fortunately, almost all of them that we picked up on ended up hitting. What I will do sometimes is I will have prediction shows, and that will be sort of a screen test for some people. And it will let me know whether or not they're good or not on camera with me. And sometimes, because I've invited some people on some pay-per-view post shows, and it just didn't hit. Denise, like that one was because Sean Waltman recommended her. And what am I going to do? Say no to Sean Waltman? And I needed something different. Alex and I we've got very good chemistry, but I didn't want to have the same team every single week or on every single show. And also, Alex has his own dynamic. He's not going to like anything on that show. And I didn't think that was fair for our specific review. So I wanted to do something different. Denise and I hit perfectly. Alex actually recommended to me that Kate join his Sour Grap show. And I said, you know what? We'll give it a shot. We'll see how it goes. We gave it a shot. It worked really, really well. On Wednesdays, we used to have Robert DeFelice, and we would still love to have Robert DeFelice on there. But it got to the point to where these AEW reviews were going 2 hours long. And I am not trying to be on a review for 2 hours long, like maybe an hour 15. So he ended up doing going back to the news stuff. List and Your Boy is different because like we're business partners now, but largely Jimmy Van is still kind of my boss. But the thing that a lot of people that know Jimmy in his personal life like about our dynamic is that I don't treat him like my boss. I treat him like everybody else, and that's what he wants. But because of he is most of those people's bosses, they don't fear him, they respect him, but they don't treat him as if he is. It's that dynamic, and he very badly wants to be treated just like everybody else. He does not want preferential treatment. He does not want special treatment. He doesn't want people kissing his ass. He wants people to be honest with him. That's the benefit of that dynamic right there.
That's really cool. Who are some current creators in Fightful, or maybe just the wrestling media in general, that you're like, I'd love to work with them a bit more, that you're not currently working with?
Got to work with John Alba quite a bit recently. That was nice. I don't want to feel like I'm leaving anybody out, but I've never worked with Simon Miller. I would love to do that. I'll mention some that I haven't worked with. Simon Miller is good. I always love Seahawk. He does just incredible stuff. But like Simon's the one that I look at and I'm like, okay, I've never done really anything with him. And he's such a funny, entertaining, charming, just genuinely good dude that I look at and I'm like, okay, I like those people being involved in wrestling. I haven't done a ton with Spencer Love, but I know him personally, and
Ooh.
he's working his ass off and doing some incredible stuff there as well.
Mm. Two really great guys that I
Yeah.
really have had the chance to podcast with, and I really enjoy it. I'm not gonna lie.
I got to do
So,
some stuff with Sam LaTurner recently as well, and
ooh,
I think that she is incredible.
I fully agree. I keep saying I agree. It's because I'm nervous. I do apologize.
That's okay.
So, when it comes to your legacy, when it comes to Fightful, say this was to all end tomorrow, what would you want your legacy to be?
Just hopefully that we did good work and that we cultivated a good audience. Like I go out of my way to let bad people know that I don't want their money. I don't want their business. I don't want them here. They can go to some other website. They can give them the clicks or whatever. But hopefully that we made a bit of a difference, that we improved the wrestling media landscape to some degree, that we improved media literacy. That one's important to me. I want people to understand that when I tell them to learn media literacy, it's not like an insult or anything. It's very important because about 10, 11 years ago, I didn't really have any. I didn't know how to determine sources or determine where a story came from and if it was credible. And I think that's very important. So hopefully, at least a little bit, we pushed forward wrestling media.
Mm. So you talked about pushing wrestling media there. Where do you want to see wrestling media improve in, say, the next year or so, etc.? But then also, I'm really curious to know, why do you think the wrestling fans are so fascinated with wrestling media?
Wrestling is so much different than other sports because things can change like at the drop of a dime, and complete stories that were intended to be told never get told.
Mm.
And it's not like baseball where somebody goes up and if a player hits a home run off another one, well, that's just the way it goes. If somebody's booked to lose to somebody else and they don't like it, they can throw a fit about it. You can't throw a fit about somebody saying, well, sorry, he hit a home run off of you. You can, but there's nothing else you can do about it. It's not predetermined. There are a lot of dramatic aspects of that go on. And I think that a lot of times people conflate characters with actual humans, and sometimes that can be beneficial, detrimental, any number of things. I think that there are both healthy and unhealthy parasocial relationships in wrestling, because you watch these people on screen and you feel like you have some sort of connection to them because you do connect to them emotionally. But you want to know how they're doing, who's pushing for them, who's not pushing for them, and all of that. And just like with anything, like I love football. I also love football media. I love to find out about trades and free agents, and I want to watch podcasts about it. It's the same with any fandom, I think.
Mm. So you talked about there your fandom of football and stuff. Where is your current fandom of wrestling, in the sense that, do you view it as a job, or is it like, I'm just a lucky guy to get to do this?
I won't say that I'm lucky because I did a lot of work. I'm
No, no, no,
fortunate.
no. And I didn't mean
No,
that
I
any
get it. I get
disrespect.
it. No, I get it. I didn't take it as disrespectful, but I mean, that's something that I stopped myself from saying because I worked really, really hard and really hard for nothing to do this. But I am fortunate because I know a lot of people that have worked really, really hard for nothing and aren't in the same position that I am. So I would say that I'm fortunate. I mean, I'll always love wrestling. I love especially the news aspect of wrestling. I love the business of wrestling, how it works, and I love the psychology of wrestling. It'll always be my first love. It'll always be the first thing that I saw and thought, I've got to be involved with that. I've got to do something contingent with that.
You talked about there being involved and being contingent. I know you did a bit of wrestling training and stuff, and you talked about wanting to do some more training. I know you had a few matches, correct?
Had about 30 or 40, yeah.
Do you think you'll ever make a comeback?
I've been propositioned to a few times, and like I did the GCW spot, and I want to make this clear to anybody that's watching. I do not accept money for bookings or anything like that. Anything I do like that is for fun. If they would like to make a donation to a charity that I recommend, that's one thing. But nothing that I do like that will compromise any of my coverage. And whoever I wrestle for has to know that. They got to know that and understand that this job comes first. I work for nobody but Fightful. I get paid by nobody but Fightful. But I love wrestling. I love performing. Unfortunately, I've had some pretty bad injuries, neck injuries, shoulder injuries. And if I actually wrestled again, I don't want to just do comedy spots, because I came up with some very serious training and some very serious trainers, and I want to do right by them. And they understand pro wrestling. I had my matches with some of my trainers, actually. They understand there's some comedic aspects, but I would like to do some serious stuff as well. At the same time, like, if I come back, I'm going to do a match with Shaza McKenzie. That's just something that I want to do. There's probably about 10 or less people that I look at and I'm like, okay, I really want to do something with them if I wrestle again. And I am going to make a go of it. I tried to last year and things were looking good, and I ran into an awful lot of health stuff. Yeah. But it's one of those things where I'll find out if my body holds up. I'm in a better place geographically to train and have people to train with. But I'm going to give it a go. I would like to at least do one more, because I don't want to have what was my last match as of now be my last match. There are actually some matches on YouTube that people will never know about that were me wrestling under a mask since I came to Fightful. And one of them has like, I think now it's like up to 60,000 views, but nobody knows it's me and nobody will ever know it's me. But I was pretty happy with that. But then a match that I had after that was just the absolute worst. I didn't like it, wasn't happy with how it went. Wasn't happy with the time that was given or anything like that. But yeah, I feel like I want to at least do one more in the future.
So, perfect scenario for your final match. Who is the opponent and why?
Well, I mean, I would love to wrestle my trainer in my last match, because that's who I had a lot of my matches against. I don't know how into that he would be. We don't talk as much anymore, unfortunately. But I mean, there are some matches that I look at and I'm like, well, I would love to do that. Shaza McKenzie, I want to wrestle her at some point. Akira, who is a deathmatch wrestler, I would love to wrestle him, but I ain't doing a death match. But I would love to do like a blood sport style match. I think me and Brian Alvarez could do something fun, because he's such a better wrestler than anybody gives him credit for. There's a friend of mine, Allie Albright, who's just starting. I think there's a fun match that we could do there. There's a few of them that I look at and I'm like, I would love to wrestle Effie. I would love to wrestle Marco Stunt. Like legitimately, the last time I saw Marco Stunt, he ran at me and I did a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker to him. Oh, wow. Outside of a Black Label Pro show. I would love to wrestle them. I think there's some entertaining or fun things that can happen with some of those.
So when it comes to, I am curious to know, and I was trying to find a segue. I do apologize. I'm curious to know about your persona when it comes to like podcasting. Do you feel like you have to put on a persona, and how do you get yourself in the zone to be like, okay, I'm going to go live. I'm going to go on a podcast?
Well, I don't have a persona. I am what everybody sees. I don't do that unless it's Quizlemania or something like that. The sense of humor that you see me have on post-show reviews is just how I am. And Quizlemania is just, it's bits, it's jokes and all that stuff. And obviously I'm not out there acting like that, but what you see on Monday shows, Wednesday shows, I don't want to do a gimmick or pretend to be something I'm not there. But on the likes of Quizlemania, I'm completely fine with that. Now, there are times we'll do skits and things like that, but I don't. It's not something that I have to get myself ready for or in the zone for, because I'm not putting on a character. I love what I do. I love having the fun that I have. I get to talk to people about wrestling all day. So there's not a lot of preparation I have to do in that regard.
Okay. What about coming off of a live stream? Do you have to do anything to sort of, I suppose, calm down? Would that be the word? Like, I know what word I'm looking for. I just don't know how to word it.
Now, what did you mean then? Like, try to explain that one to me.
So, like, do you have to sort of calm down at all in the sense, like, do you have to, um, like, for me, I know that I have to put some calming music on to be like, whew, to sort of breathe in and out, like I've done something.
So funny enough, when the Friday shows would end, back when I would do them with Anna or just on random Fridays, there would be this very quiet or calm after I would just end the show. And for some reason, it was just particularly quiet on Friday nights where I was from, and that was enough for me. But I don't have to necessarily do anything like that. I do usually like to take a few minutes and just turn off the lights and stuff that I've got on me and just relax a little bit. But usually when a post show is over, that's when my work is over for the night.
Mm-hmm. So, what do you do? This is just like the final section, and then we'll do a couple of sections to wrap up. But what do you do that's not wrestling that you enjoy? That you're like, I enjoy this, and maybe not a lot of people know about that.
I go to arcades a lot. Love going to arcades. I do a lot of I play soccer when I can, football when I can, basketball when I can. I mean, as we film this in 3 hours, I'm heading to a concert up the road from my house.
Ooh.
Go to comedy shows, just any normal stuff. Like there aren't any like hidden interests or anything like that. I like to be active as much as I can because there were days when I couldn't be physically active. And even though, I mean, I live in a lot of physical pain because of the injuries that I've had, I don't take for granted because there were days I couldn't get out of my bed, and I will never take advantage of or take for granted being able-bodied enough to enjoy myself.
I know what you mean. So,
sure.
Yeah, I totally get what you mean. So, just before we do a segment called Generic Questions, I have to ask this. What is your favorite belt that you've got behind you?
Okay, so the belts that I have behind me, the one up top is a Fightful championship, but it's the one that people can purchase. Nobody buying that. The one below it is a very generic, mass-produced belt that a lot of indies used. That one might be my favorite because I wrestled my trainer and beat my trainer for that title. The one below it is the Canyon Cup Fantasy Football Championship that I actually have to send to Shane Helms very soon. Below that, I don't even think you can see it, is a tag team championship belt that I won with my trainer. Ooh. I gotta say, probably the tag team one, even though the match that we had with it to win it was horrible. Getting to share that moment with my trainer, who during a lot of our matches, I should have not been cleared to wrestle, because my neck and shoulders were in such bad shape, and I trusted him with my life and my safety. That one was very important because we went from having to wrestle each other all the time to being able to team up, and that one was pretty important to me.
That's really cool. But before we do generic questions really quickly, as a very prolific interviewer in my eyes, I am curious to know, where can I improve? What did you enjoy about this conversation? Anything in between?
I thought it was one of the better interviews that I've ever been a part of. I think you asked very good questions. You asked very good follow-up questions. Yeah, I mean, I look at it, I think you're doing a great job.
I appreciate that. I'll ask you again off camera, but I do appreciate that. So, as we wrap this up, Sean, we're going to do a very quick segment that I call generic questions. Those of you that have seen my interviews before will know this is where I ask my guests their favorite match, favorite pay-per-view, favorite tag team, favorite wrestler's theme, and favorite wrestler of all time. Basically questions that Sean might get asked on social media quite regularly. So now he'll have a place to be like, look, I've answered this.
I love that.
Please go watch this. So what's your favorite match of all time?
My favorite match of all time, if I had to pin down one, I would say Christopher Daniels, AJ Styles, Samoa Joe, TNA Unbreakable 05. Like that was the first time I watched a match and I thought, well, that was a perfect match. Like that was the first time that I did that. My favorite that I've ever seen in person is FTR Briscoes at Supercard last year, especially considering what we know happened.
What about your favorite pay-per-view?
Now, see, that's tough because I can't necessarily, in my mind, look back at a single pay-per-view and just remember the entire card.
I
But
can. So if you can name a match, I might be able to help you.
Sure, but I mean, like, anytime people ask my favorite WrestleMania, I say 19 because I thought the card was absolutely loaded. I've got a soft spot for Royal Rumble 07 because of the way that the show or the Rumble match ended, but I would probably have to say WrestleMania 19 because I thought it was it was a bridging of so many eras right there. And the way that WrestleMania looked in 2002 and looked in 2004 are so different. And I thought that 2003 was a great bridging of that gap.
I've never heard Mania 19 described like that, but I think that's a perfect analogy.
Yeah, I mean, you get Hogan and Vince, which is just such a wild thing to have on that show. Rock and Austin.
Deathmatch.
Yeah. Triple H and Booker T, even though Booker T should have won that. Jericho, who is still wrestling against Shawn Michaels. Trish and Victoria and Jazz, and they actually got time. There's a lot on that show that I liked, especially the lower half of that show. The back half of that show was just unreal.
What about your favorite wrestler's theme of all time?
I probably have to say Batista, the Saliva theme. I like Saliva an awful. The I Walk Alone theme. That one was probably my favorite, and I liked Saliva's music in general. But then when it switched from his generic rock theme to what he had that absolutely slapped, I was like, man, that's so good. It was just a good Saliva song in general. I also like Victoria's old theme that they did with Tattoo. I thought that one was really good because that was her theme before it was a hit song. So that was pretty cool.
That's cool. And then who's your favorite wrestling tag team?
The Rockers, because that was my first favorite anything ever was the Rockers. I liked Marty Jannetty, and Shawn Michaels was all right too. Again, I'm sure I watched this actually like 2 years later and thought that they were breaking up at the moment. But when they broke up and I saw it, I was just mortified and heartbroken and all that stuff. But the Rockers by far, because I think that they helped change tag team wrestling.
That's really cool. And again, I should stop saying I agree, but I agree. And then finally, as we wrap this up, who is your favorite wrestler?
Man, if we're going all time, that's so tough because every time somebody asks me, I feel like I have a different answer. I think my favorite person to watch what they do specifically in the ring ever is actually Shelton Benjamin. Like, I saw what he did and I was like, I want to be able to do that stuff. So I would work on my box jumps and I would go train amateur wrestling, or I would work on how I would do a super kick. I think Shelton Benjamin is probably my favorite too, because I feel like there's still so much that we didn't see that we should have seen from him. But I would say he's probably my favorite. Also, Sasha Banks, Mercedes Moné is a personal favorite of all time.
That's very cool. But as we wrap this up, Sean, the question I end all my interviews on is with YouTube, with podcasting, with social media in general. We're all sort of going to live forever in some sort of very weird way. So what is one piece of content from your wrestling media that you want to be remembered for? And then what is one that you're like, Jimmy, if that could be taken down, I would appreciate it.
The one that I would want taken down. Yeah, I don't know if there's any articles, but there was a tweet that I put out when I wouldn't say it was work, but it was me being a little catty when Malachi Black had posted a video about some things, and I stand by all of our reporting in that. And I said something that I shouldn't have said. I said, maybe I should show the receipts of him saying that he wanted to go to WWE, because that was something that was a real thing that he had said to somebody. But I hadn't watched his video yet. I hadn't watched the context of it. I just knew that I had had some issues with stories about him being misrepresented multiple times and maybe people not understanding what that came from. I would love to take that back, because that wasn't a good thing for me to do, regardless of if I agreed or disagreed. But the one piece of work that I hope stands out above everything, the one story to break, is CM Punk returning for sure. But there was an article that I did in 2016, and I was the first person to talk to Muhammad Hassan since he left wrestling. So nobody had talked to him in a decade. I think that maybe he did one interview to promote a comic book, and that was it. But I did a feature on him. And not only that, I spoke to a lot of people that were in the locker room with him about how all that unfolded. And back then, I think that it was one of the better pieces of wrestling media that anybody had done. I think now other things have far surpassed it. And even I think that I'm better at things now, but especially that was very important to my career. And at least a few people took notice, and they were like, oh, well, he wrote this, he's worth following. And it helped me out an awful lot.
That's very, very cool. And that is something that I will probably dig up after this conversation. I'm not going to lie. But as we wrap this up, Sean, I want to obviously say thank you for coming on. But where can the good people find you and all your content?
Fightful.com. Just head over there. Fightful has everything.
It's well worth doing, guys. So if you guys like this video, but before we wrap this up, obviously I want to say thank you for 150 episodes. But if you guys do like this video, make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter @TomTalkCrash, and I will see you in the next video. A goodbye now.